Hello and welcome to season 2 of the Yukon Entrepreneur podcast series, a series about how Yukon businesses are adapting their businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm your host, Kari Johnston, and I'm recording today from beautiful Dakwakata Haines Junction on the traditional territory of Champagne-Aniak First Nations. And my guest today is Jayden. Jayden, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Jayden Soroka. I'm with Outpost 31 and Creative Lab and a bunch of other crazy stuff happening up in the Yukon. And I'm coming, actually recently moved, so I'm coming from outside of Whitehorse, but in the Kwalindun First Nations territory. So it's pretty exciting to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Jayden. Jayden, so just kind of give me an overview. What is it that you do?
Good question. That's evolved over the last little while, and specifically with COVID, actually, it really changed. So I facilitate, story and vision through different means and platforms, and I would say deployment opportunities that exist in the world. Stereotypically, we used to work in film and animation. So I'm a classically trained animator, worked in 3D and 2D, but really fell in love with animation a long time ago. And there's been a natural evolution now to work more on what's called XR. So we are now really developing XR content. It's just a different way to tell story. It's more immersive. XR stands for extended reality. So that's anything that's beyond you. So that's virtual reality, augmented reality, 360, incorporates motion capture, 3D scanning. So we are kind of trying to tell stories in new ways. As someone said, new tech, but old tales. And I like that. And COVID allowed us to really, I think, make that transition in a meaningful way, because we saw the potential and we're like, you know what, we need to kind of move into what the world is transitioning into outside of the territory, which is XR. Yeah.
Very interesting. And how long have you been in business?
Myself, so I've had multiple companies. Outpost actually just recently merged with my first company. So technically speaking, now we have, we've been in business for almost 14 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my first company was Pixelbox, and it merged with Outpost 31 recently. For many reasons, it was time to merge the two. But in total, been working in this field for over 20 years, but in terms of an entrepreneur with a business, it's been actually about 18 years. But this recent iteration is about 13 years old now, 14 years old. Yeah.
Okay. And who's your customer? Is it Yukon? Is it Canadian? Is it international?
It's everyone, especially when we're working in XR. When we worked in film and TV, we did lots of work with, I would say, national broadcasters. We worked with CBC, the National Film Board, obviously with YMD as a huge supporter. I wouldn't say they're a client, but a huge supporter, Yukon Media Development locally, around content creation and creativity. But we work with tourism and culture. We're working a little bit with First Nations, but we have clients in Australia. I've got clients in the States, clients in Ontario, actually recently some clients in Asia. So there's just lots of work out there, especially with XR, because it's such a new niche field. If you're working in that field, there is not enough creators for the amount of content that's being developed currently. So there's lots and lots of people that are just finding us, so we're in the Yukon and like, hey, I hear you guys do this work. And I'm like, how'd you find us? And so it's been a really interesting time to work in that way where, we are at capacity right now, and I'm looking to grow the team because Yukon dogs. So it's, but like we have, we're all over the place now, and it's been really exciting. And we have some really cool projects that are local now, like really focused on bringing the technology and the skill sets we've developed internally and kind of trying to deploy them locally, supporting some cool projects in Carcross. We're supporting museums locally and doing some training actually in the communities around XR in the schools. So it's been pretty fun. Yeah.
That sounds really exciting, Jayden.
Yeah.
What are you learning about your customer during the pandemic?
Oh, well, good question. The pandemic forced everyone to obviously isolate and have distance. While the world was kind of hurting and people were suffering, if you worked in the digital sector, we kind of saw a moment of flourishment that we hadn't seen previously, just because people needed to go digital, right? Zoom took off, all these things. Netflix had the biggest, obviously, subscription in there in history because people were at home. And so if you work in it like we do, we just saw lots of opportunity. People were asking, we need help to now make this more visual. We need to go online. We can't do this in person. We're talking to a conference that wanted us to develop a game engine to do like a virtual conference because they can't meet in person. So it was an interesting time. There was people were looking for ways. So our clients that we worked with came back to us with lots of work. We found new clients is what happened. A lot of people that were coming with new ideas, new problems really, and we wanted to solve the technology. So, if you were working right, like in COVID and even now in a digital sector where you're not necessarily on set in a big crew, if you're a small agile crew working in digital, the world was kind of your oyster for a little while there, and it still is because, we can do things as a small team that was safe during COVID. We still can do things really safely. That larger studios were struggling with during COVID, right? So it was a time for the small studios to really take off and start doing cool things. And we saw that happen and we took advantage of that. We're like, so Outpost 31 was founded by 3 partners, myself, Neil McDonald, and Dave Hamlin. During COVID, the 2 of them decided to leave the company for many reasons. And we just had different, I think, directions in life. And I'm really interested in technology. I'm interested in like the next way to tell a story and what's out there. And they're more classically based. I'll be honest, like they're not easily replaceable. Frankly, they're impossibly different. Like they're some of the most talented content creators in their field in the North. So when they left, I had the choice of either shutting things down or kind of bringing a new team in. And I chose to kind of, okay, well, there is this opportunity that exists. It's a weird time in the world. It's COVID. And I chose to take a lot of risk. And I spent 6 months, took 6 months off, said no to everything, and trained a team of up and coming kind of young adults in the territory who were interested in this field. Because I saw the potential. Like, I think I did see that eventually, once COVID, calmed down, like there would be a time of flourishment for everybody, but digital specifically is just the time. So after 6 months, these 4 interns are now employed, and like we are doing things that Outpost has never thought about doing. We're doing things at pan-territorially that have never been done before, and it's exciting, right? We're in leadership. We're at the forefront of like this frontier of XR in the North, and we don't want to be the only one. Like we're very much about sharing. So we're working with businesses. We do lots of conferences around how XR can be integrated into the North, whether it's business or First Nations or government, or creative or nonprofit. We're working with some theater companies on how to use motion capture to do, really cool puppetry work that can be a performance, but then be shared internationally, digitally, or live streamed, as a performance. So it's been an exciting time. The reality was that like to do that, I needed a team. And what happened in this internship, I took a bunch of youth under 30. And at the end of it, they were doing things that I didn't understand. We kind of had an idea of where we'd be in 6 months. They reached that goal in 3.5 months. Like we had reached the goal to where I thought we'd be in 6. So the last 2.5 months, I was like, well, let's explore what we could do. And I asked the team, what are you guys interested in? And they were interested in, XR, interested in more game engine stuff. So we took 2.5 months to kind of figure out what that looks like for our team. And I would come in the office, and every other day I come in and would be like, I'm doing this. For instance, one had a phone, and he was able to track with his phone the environment and put in 3D objects. And then he could go into different rooms and come back, and those objects maintain tracking in the locations that they were. Like it was just one guy during COVID, we had a COVID scare, in the office as everyone did. And Joseph, one of my interns, decided, well, I'm going to go home, but I'm going to recreate our office in 3D in a virtual space. So he had VR goggles, created our office in 3D, and was at home working, pretend like he was in our office, but actually poured it into our computers. So he's using our power at the office and our server and our capabilities, but from home. And he sent me a photograph of him, like a virtual photograph, but it looked like he was sitting in our office in a virtual office, but it was just hilarious. And he's like, I just missed the office. So I made it in a game engine. So these interns in the course of 6 months were just doing things that I didn't understand, and that's okay. I'm kind of taking more of a leadership role as a business owner now, more of a CEO. I'm stepping back from the technical skills, from the creative skills, because it's time to start allowing others to take on that. So I'm passing that torch forward. Like there's these young people that are super creative, super interested in tech, and how tech can actually not only work in our lives, but how it can actually make our lives better. And like they're kind of becoming stewards of how we bring technology into our lives in a meaningful way that is beneficial, that isn't exploitive, but actually creates better experiences, better ways to tell stories, more immersion, and to see how they're playing and what they're interested in. Like there's so much hope for the future, like the youth. What I realize is we just need to give them an opportunity, some mentorship, access to like the infrastructure, and like they will just kind of take it and run with it and do some amazing things. So it was one of the proudest moments as an owner, was just this internship, because I saw the potential that exists in the territory, which is in our youth, especially like they're digital natives. They've grown up with this stuff. They understand it more than I do. I mean, I am really savvy. I'm like, the things I can do on software, I'm very savvy. And my interns constantly put me to shame. It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
Jayden, that's already an amazing story about pandemic adaptation and the ability to take that 6 months of reset to transform your business and see where your opportunities are.
Yeah.
I want to kind of take you even further back in time to like before, that even was an opportunity for you, or just a glimmer in your eye. Like, what's your first memory of the pandemic? When did you realize that this was going to be a thing and you were going to have to shift what you were doing?
I had just, I take a lot of risks in business. I think partly like Neil and Dave, my other founders, I love them. They're way less, they're more risk averse than I am. So when the pandemic started, I'd already done some risky moves and made some risky plays around bringing actually motion capture to the territory for the first time ever. So I was, playing with the acquisition of some very expensive things in a time where everything's shutting down. So I remember the pandemic started and I was sitting up in my living room, just looking out at Whitehorse. Everyone's home. It was quiet. It was weird. And just thinking like, is this the right time to take all these risks financially and business wise? And it was really hard. Like I struggled for a while with that decision, right? Because I, for the first time in many, many years, we've lived in a time like relative peace in the world. I mean, prosperity, we had a really long go there where things were pretty good and it was really easy to take risks and really easy to and then all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I was faced with real strife in the world. And it made me question like what I'm doing. Does it make sense? Is this the right move? And, typically I don't think too much. It's like, oh, things are okay. We'll figure it out, And I was faced with like, is this going to be okay? Is this going to like bring us down to nothing? Is this going to destroy what we've been building? But me being me, at the end of the day, I decided to take the risk and jump kind of off that ledge and try it out and see what happens. And it's led to where we are today as a company, which we're doing things that I never, like I said, never thought possible. But I was scared and I was like uncomfortable because I've never been faced with such a possibility of like massive disruption to business in general, right? And we just, none of us knew what would happen and how it would go. But I remember just sitting there in my living room for multiple days, pondering like, what should we do? It was weird. I just never felt that way before, where I was just, typically I'm not too scared of risk, but I was quite scared of risk back then. Yeah.
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 Which of the, risk assessment, and we've been putting these public health measures in to help us, navigate the risk environment here in the territory in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Which of those public health measures have been the most challenging for you as a business owner during this time?
I'll be honest. It's probably more external to the Yukon than internal, our struggles. Like I said, we have a small team. So we were really actually able to be safe and adapt and work together in an office during COVID, which is pretty amazing. When there was a scare or those things happened, we would shut down. And luckily we're digital, so they can go home and kind of keep working for the most part. We don't have a lot of people coming into our office. Like it's just, so there wasn't a whole lot of, possible transference of the disease at the time. So relatively in the Yukon, we were okay, I had a harder time with not having a community anymore, not being able to see friends, like I think a big part of telling stories and being a storyteller is experience in the world. And for 2 years, we didn't have much experience. So I feel like that part of our soul, this part of creativity and having rich experiences in life, I didn't have much to say because like none of us were doing much, right, at that time. So that was really hard, both mentally and physically, to be removed from the amazing things that the North allow us. It's a quality of life up here we have, and COVID stripped a lot of that away for a while, from everybody in the world. But we moved here for the life, right? The lifestyle, and I moved here for the community. Amazing people live here, and it was hard to lose a community for a couple of years and kind of feel like you're on your own, not only in business but alone in your home, all those things. But to be honest, it was more globally speaking. COVID hurt us. The supply chains were big. We work in a technical field. We need silicon. We need certain kind of rare metals. I would buy equipment that we needed for stuff, and it would come 7 months late. Like that was the reality. So even for the internship, we had a plan to acquire some equipment. We had AR headsets, we had 3D scanners, all these things were kind of coming into our studio, and we had a curriculum that we were going to work on, right? But I had to adapt because, okay, this week we're supposed to do this. That gear, I have no idea where it is. It's not coming. It's not here yet. Hey, your computer that you're supposed to be working on, it's not here because that silicon is who knows. So it was like a waiting game. But we adapted. We had lots of stuff in the office already from previous work, so we were able to kind of figure things out. But the supply chain slowed down everyone, but it really slows down technical businesses that work in a technical field, technology, right? So that was hard. But also, like, I could pretty quickly see the opportunities that existed too around what we're doing. So it was a funny time to see the risk, understand what was going on, but also see a lot of the potential. And like I said before, we ended up taking some risks. Some of the greatest businesses have come out of in history have come out of stock crashes. When there is massive strife in the world, there has been these businesses, like, I don't know the names of them, but I read lots of books, and like talk about, like, in these moments of strife, in these moments of global eruption and decay, there are these businesses that kind of find a way through it, and they thrive. And so that was kind of my hope, was like, rather than thinking about, hey, this is the end of us, or we're going to really have a hard time, how do I convert this into an opportunity? That's a sad way, because COVID was not an opportunity. It was a sad thing to say that it was a hard time, but how can I use this time to get us to what would be after COVID, right? Thinking like, when COVID's over, where do I want to be? And that was part of the internship. I think we need to grow a team. It's a good time to grow a team because, things were slowing down. There's lots of work, but I just decided it was time to kind of reassess and evolve as a company and getting ready for the future. And the future for me was XR. If you look globally, you got Apple releasing their AR headsets, Meta, which is Facebook, are releasing like 4 over the next year and a half, 4 new headsets. NVIDIA developed a new headset. You got Samsung and Microsoft doing their own HoloLens, which is their AR goggles. The military in the US just paid $23 billion to work with Microsoft on AR glasses. So there is like that field is starting to see momentum. And then your phones too, like there's a lot of stuff coming up with phones for XR. So I can just see, we're not there yet. It definitely is futuristic. It's definitely coming. It's down the road. But if we start to build capacity now, when the world is ready for it, we have the capacity to take advantage of that moment in time and be a leader, not only in the North, but maybe a leader globally around content creation for XR. So I just saw that we need to start building towards that. Even though the industry is still growing and it's still a little bit like, what's going to happen? We're seeing a lot of cool trends happening in Asia, in the United States, over in Europe. And it's like, if we don't start developing the capacity now, we're going to be, left behind again, like we are in so many other fields, because we are in the North, and it's just a reality of being here, right? It's hard to compete. So I'm trying to build capacity now so we can actually compete later. Yeah.
Jayden,
yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. You are. You're adding so much more into it too. You've talked a lot about different adaptations that you've made in your business, pivots, within the industry itself and to your mentorship program. What adaptation are you most proud of during this time?
Good question. I think there's 2 adaptations. One was internal for me, and one was external with the team. I'll start with me first. So I've had a couple great people, mentors in my life. I've been very blessed to have some amazing people who have been very successful in business, are still successful in business, and are happening friends of mine that, every once in a while over a nice drink or a tea or a meal, just kind of divulge some amazing stuff. And there's one guy in the Yukon actually who's been very successful. His name's Toby. I sat down with him. We're doing some work with him. I was actually doing some XR work for his business in the North, developing some IP for him. And I was at one night with him. And so he does Aurora Borealis stuff. And we're sitting in his truck and hanging out, and it's about the witching hour when the aurora comes out. So he takes us outside. He's like, okay, because we're doing some filming of it in stereoscopic 3D to do it as a VR experience. So I had a whole kit outside, but he could care less about the camera. as soon as the Aurora came out, it was like he was a kid, and I'd never seen someone so joyful. And this is like, he's out there all the time. He sees Aurora every night it's out. He's out because his clients wanted to be out. So, but I've never seen someone with such consistency. It's like when it's out, it's like he saw it for the first time. The joy he had, and his business. What I loved about it, he's not interested in, necessarily the money. His approach was like, I want my clients to have my experience, have this joy that I have. And in doing so, he's been very successful. His interest isn't in the necessarily the end goal or the financial monetization of what he's doing. It's in the user experience, right? Like he's all about user experience, and he is like his company and his idea in the North is expanding, it's growing, it's exploding, and he's doing very well. And I think what I love about his approach, he's not thinking about the money, he's thinking about the user. And so my transition over this term of COVID was to really think about the partnerships we built. And my focus is on the user experience, the partnerships, how we want to basically explore technology with our collaborators, less about the money. Because I'll be honest, if you're doing those things, if you are approaching your partners with meaningful projects, with ways to engage that, are going to support either their product, their story, their vision, their needs, the money will come. And if you stop worrying about the money and start focusing more on, what you're doing in the world, how you're creating, how you're being, the integrity approach with your clients and with the work you're doing, you're going to be okay. And that's one thing that Toby taught me, was just like, don't worry about that, worry about this. And that's also way more fun as an owner, to think about the experience of your clients, the experience of your users. And if they're having a blast, you're having a blast. And it's true, because I was out there and like, as soon as I saw him enjoying the Aurora, I was enjoying, like I saw it for the first time, because he was telling all these things, and he was just so in love with Aurora, and it allowed me to love Aurora in a way that I haven't in a long time, because we see lots of it up here. So seeing something like my business or Aurora again for the first time, and re-envisioning like how to approach that. So that was a really great moment with him. So I've shifted how I approach business, and it's really about, it's less about money, and that's been kind of nice not to worry so much about that anymore. Not that money's important, but if you worry about it, it kind of starts to own you, and all you're worried about is, okay, the next contract, how to make that money, how to pay those bills. And that's important. I think I've been around business long enough that I'm no longer like, if you're just doing good work in the world and crafting great things and working with great people, you're making enough money to make a living. You may not be a rich man or a rich woman, person, but at least you're able to pay the bills and at least have a decent life. So I'm less worried about money, and that's been a nice transition to focus less on that. In terms of the other part, it's been working with youth. As a business, we need to engage with youth across the board in the territory more. They are a gold mine of opportunity. They are like, their interests, they're so eager for opportunity. They're so eager to work. They're so eager to learn new skills. When I sat down with the four of them at first, just to see their genuine joy and interest in just an opportunity in the North to work in this field. Like none of them thought we would never get this opportunity to work in this field in the North ever, right? And so we gave them the opportunity, and they didn't let me down. They really did take that and run with it and make things happen. And they're not the minority. I think the majority in the Yukon, like youth up here. We need to start engaging more. We need to start in schools to start to really think about how do we engage with meaningful education around technology in schools, because that's the way things are going. And we need, not necessarily so that they understand technology, but I think the Yukon could be a place around stewardship of technology, because the youth here have different experiences. They live on the land. They just have a different connection to what's happening. And I have seen how they approach, they're very woke, and their approach to technology is really interesting because they care about how it's being used. Not necessarily how they're making money off of it, but how are we using this to actually do something either good in the world? So it's a shift, right? I really love that shift. And I think we need to start empowering more youth to work in all the fields in the territory, but they love technology. They live on their phones, right? They get it more than I do. So that was a huge shift for me in terms of business, was just see the potential of hiring youth and working with youth. Yeah.
What have you learned about your business model over the last 2 years? I mean, you're trying to compete in an international space. So what are you realizing?
Good question. So a big part of this, I think, is you don't get far if you don't take any risks. Outpost was static for a bit, and it's because I think we became risk averse as a democracy, right? There's 3 of us, and we started, and I think whether it's COVID or any time, you need to kind of take risk in order to see rewards, especially in business. If you're not willing to, you often don't go very far. And yeah, the opposite side is you risk and you fail. But failure isn't always failure. Failure is often education. So that's been one thing, is just understanding that, I need to be pretty much always open to take a little bit of risk or a lot of risk in order to see us succeed, especially in XR. So we're in a field that's super technical, very cutting edge, very expensive, and very unknown. So there's a bunch of risks already there. There's a risk to just stay in the game, the cost of it. There's a risk to play in the game, because in the Yukon, we don't have, I'll be honest, XR specialists, except for now my team. Like we took 6 months, and we're still developing our skills. We are not by any means elite technicians in that field, but in the territory, there's no one really. So the danger in trying to play in this game is that if these interns who are now my employees choose to like try a different field and go somewhere else, then I have to rebuild it again, or I have to go and, recruit. I've tried to recruit people from outside the territory up here before. When I tell them, hey, come up here and do animation or do XR, and they're like, in the Yukon, like, why would I leave Toronto or Vancouver to do that? They don't see, once you're here, you get it, but they don't see the potential of doing that field, because it's digital. You can work anywhere and being up here. Whereas working with people who already live here and youth that want to live here and stay here, they're invested. They want to be here, but they want to work in a technical field. And so, but there is a danger, because I've chosen to work in a very specialized field. And of course, I'm also very encouraging. If my interns want to go and make their own businesses, I'm all for that, because I think that was the end goal, is like, I want to empower them to possibly and hopefully have a career in this field in the North if they choose to. And to be honest, all 4 of them, if they left tomorrow and started their businesses, would be successful. And that's actually okay with me, because I think we need to proliferate this opportunity locally. There's a lot of opportunity there. Yeah.
Did you, early in the pandemic or throughout, access any of the pandemic related supports for businesses, like the pivot program or employee sickness benefits?
Right, yeah.
Or
nothing federal, but we did take on the pivot program, which helped us to realize either we need to grow or we need to shrink. And that was also a catalyst, I think, for Neil and Dave to think about their next phase in the industry. And I think that pivot program was also part of the catalyst for us to like split ways. And a big part of that was like, we needed a CEO. We needed someone to be at the helm. Democracy is great, but in history, vision comes from a singular leader, right? Like vision is the reason why on film sets there's a director. If you don't have one person who's guiding the vision, and it's democracy, and it's like, choices being made by committee, first off, it washes out the quality. Like it's just pale in comparison. So you need vision. And we realized we needed leadership. And we needed a CEO, but none of us wanted to be the CEO at that time. I'm very happy now to be the CEO. Like I love that I'm able, I think I still wanted to be creative at that point. That was a couple years ago. I still was desperate to be creative. I was still wanting to learn the software and play around with the technology. COVID and other things have really allowed me to think differently about business. And I'm very happy now to be the CEO and thinking about high level, like bird's eye view of how to approach things and just kind of materializing and catalyzing opportunities locally. Finding ways for us to use this technology and bringing more cool things to my staff to play with and work on that are meaningful to them. I'll be honest, we've had some things approach us and we talk about it. And sometimes there's some projects I feel a bit unaware of their approach. And there's a bit of danger around how they're approaching the Yukon, the North. We don't feel like, oh, this is dangerous to get involved in, because they don't actually understand what they're trying to do locally. And we don't want to, luckily we're in a place we can choose not to be part of those things. We don't want to have our name attached to this, because it doesn't seem like it's honest or there's not a lot of integrity moving forward with this project. Now remind me, what was your question again?
Pandemic related support. So we did pivot. Were there any gaps in support, like things that you needed, or like somewhere where the pandemic was affecting your business, but there wasn't anything there for you?
We had work, more than enough work. Like we were busy, but for me, I knew that we're in a time of weird, obviously change. And so pivot for us, I didn't apply pivot because we were struggling. I applied pivot because we had opportunity, and I was like, I don't know where to go next with this. So it was just helping us to figure out, and we needed a leader. And, like I said before, vision comes from a singular person, Mahatma Gandhi, Muhammad Ali, you got JFK, like leadership, right? And it comes from a single person. So we realized there has to be someone at captain the ship. Otherwise, the ship was meandering through the ocean, right? And so Pivot helped us to understand that. And that Pivot was a huge part of, I think, where we are today. So I'm really thankful to the team there and the support they gave us, and our consultant, who was amazing to work with too. Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Where, you're obviously thinking about your business really differently. Where are you seeing your opportunity?
And it's cliche everywhere. That's a problem. I'm kind of an optimist in the world, and I can see how specifically XR is such an adaptable technology, an adaptable approach to storytelling, where you can convert any space into an opportunity in some ways. We're working with museums now on, rather than renovating the space, rather than like redoing this thing, we can build virtual infrastructure. We can basically bring your assets to life. So rather than spend all this money to renovate or to build a new wing of the museum, you can go outside and we can actually create that wing digitally, and people can walk around with their phones or headsets in an experience if they want to, or inside. Or you can create a relationship and a contact with an asset or a story that's much more engaging than it was just as like a flat surface, right? So, or what do you call those? Like dioramas, right? So it is, I love dioramas, to be honest. I love real 3D tactile things more than I love digital. But if I could go back in time, I think I would build dioramas for museums. Yeah, so it's been fun, but I think I'm outside. Whenever someone approaches me with a film idea, I just think about it now differently. How can we approach this with a much more immersion? Like, what is a way to approach the same story, but to immerse people in that story? And pretty quickly, they're all buying into, oh, let's not make a film, let's make an XR experience. And I was like, yeah, it makes more sense. Not for everything, but I do see how working with clients, even people that want to train, you can use motion capture, right, to create training for people so that they don't have to necessarily go on site. They can be at home. You just get the goggles and you can learn how to use equipment, or you can walk around the site that you're going to go to next week in a virtual space, and you can walk around and get a sense of where you're going to be going to, and what the environment is like, what the equipment's like. Or you can do photogrammetry. You can scan environments, and people can actually, for instance, get an example of XR in Minds was, I think it's now called Victoria, but it's Goldcorp. Back in the day when it was Goldcorp, they were flying planes over and taking photogrammetry. And so anybody involved in the mine could log into their virtual reality mine site and go back forwards in time and see how the mine's changing with real imageries of real locations. And so it allowed them to like move around and understand, this equipment was there last week. We need to move that over here. We need to do this. So it's like almost real time analysis of a location, which is pretty cool. So there's a ridiculous amount of potential. And that's where I think my problem is I'm an optimist too. I see opportunity everywhere, and it gets me into trouble. I can definitely get my hands into too many cool things all at once, because I love new ideas. I love doing concepts. So my big thing now is to like rein it in and be like, okay, my team is able to do so much, and so we need to like slow down the concept train. But it's cool to kind of, I see the world differently now. I don't see it like I used to, and XR has allowed me to think about it as an immersion. It's not a flat screen anymore. It's a 3D space you can move in, you can play in, and that changes how you can tell stories. It changes how you can experience a site, a location, changes how you can experience work. There's some really cool stuff with AR now, where, let's say in the Yukon, right? For instance, this landslide, we got to fly someone up. He's got to go out there and look at it. They're doing now, like places that are really remote, they're just sending HoloLens from Microsoft, and they're tapping into specialists in the UK, specialists in Germany. And basically your headset's down, it's recording your environments. As you're walking around, the person on the other end who's across the planet is seeing what you see and can draw on their screen, and virtually in your space, you can see them drawing. See this panel here? You need to go to this thing. Okay, now open that up. And they'll draw again. See this here? You need to go there, and I'll take that green line. So they're actually communicating in virtual space in real time, using very visceral experiences to tell the story of how to fix something. Doctors using that, right? AR, now that's beyond what we're doing, but AR is being used as a tool to support very, very, I would say, limited locations in the world with expertise that they haven't had access to ever. So it's a cool time, right? Where as a specialist, if you have XR, and you can be anywhere in the world supporting anything. as long as they have the headset and you have the engineer side of things. So it's a cool, there's a friend of mine is doing some work in hospitals. And so there's these amputees that he works with who have lost certain parts of their body, obviously, right? And so what they are doing is, as part of healing, they put on a VR headset, they wear a certain thing on, whether it's an arm or a leg, and in virtual space, they now have their arm back. So they go into the space and they can see what wasn't, no longer there. And as they're moving around, they can see, and it's just part of, there's a what's it called, a phantom limb, right? Where you can still feel it. But they've seen, like, mentally, they've been doing tests. The healing process for someone who has lost a limb is drastically increased when they're able to just go back for moments in time and experience what it was like to have a limb and like to have their arms or legs back, whatever it is. And that's being done with AR, it's being done with VR. And so there's massive potential in education, in healthcare, in business, in storytelling. The problem is that there's opportunity everywhere with this stuff. And so you have to kind of choose your department, your niche. And we're starting to figure out what that looks like for us in the North. But again, we don't want to be the only one doing XR. So we're very happy to share what we're up to. And we're trying to, encourage the Yukon to, like, especially youth, like, we just need to start teaching and training and building more capacity. Yeah. Yeah.
You've talked about yourself being a sort of a new CEO or sort of new in that kind of role. What are you learning about leadership in that role?
Good question too. So I think working with millennials specifically, I'm learning a lot about empathy as a leader. I think it's important to have empathy. We live in a strange time. Russia, Europe's back at war. We have COVID. The youth today are dealing with things that I never dealt with as a child. And so to have empathy, to be adaptable to them has been really helpful. So where they, I think at least my staff, it's all about, I'm not in charge. It's that I am in the charge of. So I'm supporting these individuals. I'm not doing the creative work. I just need to make sure that my team is healthy, that they're working well together, they're communicating. If there is strife, that we are managing that. So it's really about creating a really healthy team for me. And if the team's healthy, then we're doing cool things. We're doing amazing things together. If the team is unhealthy, then there's a problem, right? And so my leadership isn't necessarily about jumping in there. And I mean, I've done the teaching. I've kind of given them the skills. Like I said, they are now taking off and doing things I don't understand. So my role now is really creating that glue, that community, that environment that's just super supportive of them and feeling like they can take risks. I think it's been dangerous. Millennials, they've been told, like, if you want to do it, you can do it. They get awards for everything, right? And so they're not used to failing. And my team, they're well aware. I'm like, you guys can fail in my office. It's okay. Like, I think it's important for them because that's where you really start learning. So, yeah, you made something, the client didn't like it. That's okay. We'll just go back and change it. Like, we're not doctors. We're not saving lives. It's okay to fail in this environment, right? So it's been a good thing to realize, is to allow them to fail, but to feel the support that when they fail, we're just going to pick them up again and we're going to, brush it off and then try again. And I think a lot of them in other jobs haven't felt that much capacity and opportunity to like try and fail. And that's been really cool to allow them to have at the office. And like I said, that comes again from being an empathetic leader and just trying to put myself in their shoes and just understand what they're going through and being open to, like, allowing them to do what they need to do to be healthy. I think for a long time, and as an owner, we sacrifice a lot to be an entrepreneur. We make a lot of risky choices in life that often aren't healthy. They're healthy for the business. They aren't healthy for us. And I'm trying to also, like, allow them to take their own risks and but under a secure kind of space where they can do that and still feel like they're going to be okay. So it's been a really fun time. I'm still, this is a new thing for me, being a leader in that capacity. And I've worked in other capacities with youth before. So it's cool to be a CEO, employing them and paying them for, like, super highly technical, very complex fields. So that's a whole different thing. But I've always wanted to work with youth again in some capacity, and it's cool. I never thought I could do it as a business in this field. So that's been really cool for me to, it kind of just fell in my lap. I've been wanting to work with youth for a while, and I felt like, well, let me try this. I'll just, I'll create an internship. So it's been nice to work with youth again in that way and give back to the community through my craft, which, like I said, I'm transition away from the creative, from the technical. So if I left that behind, the work I'm doing in the Yukon is very, very specific. And if I stop doing that, in some ways, the Yukon no longer has access to animation, visual effects, XR. And knowing that I wanted to transition away and be more of a leader and a CEO, I knew that I wanted to give that skill back to somebody else to kind of pass the torch to the next generation. So it was nice to be given. And I'll be honest, the opportunity was supported by locals and federal funding bodies to allow me to teach. And it's allowed me to obviously not reduce the capacity of the Yukon, but actually increase it. That's what the intern did. Like what I did is now being done threefold because my team can do that. And I'm just able to kind of work with, partners, governments, First Nations, schools around how we continually grow this capacity territorially. Yeah. I ramble a lot. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm
No, it's fantastic. You did. And it kind of tees up into my next one, which is, we're learning to live with COVID. We're starting to welcome people back to the territory, and Yukoners are starting to travel more. And so we're sort of opening up our economy again.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're really paying attention to that maybe the pandemic highlighted, or the major issues when you think about what the Yukon economy is becoming?
What the Yukon economy is becoming. Let me ask you this: from your interviews, just give me a Cole's notes. Like, what have you seen? What are people seeing, or that, like, at least an idea of what you've been hearing? I'm just curious. I can answer that. I'm kind of curious. I guess I need a bit more context. I'm looking for, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would speak more like my experience with COVID-19, and I think you touched on this maybe a little bit too when you're just talking about the ethics with how we conduct ourselves as business owners. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's this balance between taking on risk and being more like understanding what's safe risk to take on, and what's but also being ambitious enough to take that risk on, and finding that balance here in the territory in a sort of fragile ecosystem where capacity is always a challenge, where it's not there's not often you got to build all of it, like you got to build the human resource, the all of the opportunity ecosystem to play in. So I think like that's been one thing that kind of reflects back. And then when I speak more about the ethics of what it means to be a business owner in the territory, I think it's really about understanding our collective responsibility to the treaty, to the final agreements, to what it means to be operating within traditional territory. And when you open yourself up to understanding that and take the risk of decolonizing or of seeing the extent of colonization within yourself and within the way you're doing business, it opens you up to unlimit a lot more potential and a lot even richer, greater business opportunity to work here in the north.
Yeah. I didn't grow up here. Grew up in Saskatchewan, but I never really was a fan of flatland. So when I came to Yukon, I was obviously sold. But yeah, I'm actually Ukrainian, and with a couple other things mixed in there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I live in a time of colonization, all those things. I've started with a leg up in life in a lot of ways, just by the color of my skin, right? That's the reality of it. And I also had incredibly supportive parents. We were not wealthy, but I had an abundance of support. And I think that allowed me to be more of a risk taker in general when I was a kid, which meant that now as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, I still am a bit of a risk taker. As you said, no risk is safe. Like in the name, risk is risk, right? But there's levels of risk, and the higher, like the littler you take, the littler gain you have. The higher risk you take, the higher gain you have, or the opposite, where you have a huge setback, or you close your company down, or you lose your partner. Who knows what happens, right? And so with this now, COVID slowing down and things going back to normal, what I'm seeing is that the Yukon wants so quickly to get back to normal, and we lack people that are willing. Like, everyone is short-staffed, right? And so we want tourism to just bounce back to where it was, but everyone was let off. People have left the Yukon, so there isn't a capacity right now to. And the danger is if we jump back too quick, obviously we're going to be overcrowded and just overdrawn with people and wants and needs, and we can't obviously meet those things. We're working with a few people right now who are thinking about that already and are trying to build real capacity that is sustainable moving forward. And I love that. It's like, how do you think about, okay, not COVID, who cares, but like just it's about building sustainability no matter what. And it's been cool to be a part of that approach and think about that. And I'll be honest, XR has been a big conversation about a lot of that, because when you build it, it just kind of exists. And it can also be a form of, sadly, of employment. Like rather than employ an employee, a lot of what we can do with XR is create the experience that you need an employee to do to replicate. So then rather than needing someone on site, if someone has a phone, they can actually just scan a location, and all of a sudden we have a digital performance that loads up and there's a character in front of you in 3D space on your phone and is telling you what a person would be telling you in person. So it alleviates the need for capacity locally. It alleviates the need for personnel locally if you build the XR. It's kind of cool. You build it once and it's like you have a person on site all the time. So we're looking at people talking about that, right? About we need certain jobs. Can we replace certain positions with an XR basically opportunity or model or deployment in this location? I was like, yeah, we can. Not everything, but there are certain things that you can. I don't talk about like robots in the world, but XR is, the evolution towards that, right? Is you can create a virtual character that can support specifically around tourism, not necessarily restaurants, but XR is not going to cook you food, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. But there's lots of businesses and opportunities where XR can support, I think, sustainable kind of deployment, looking into the future in terms of what the opportunities exist for tourism and culture and even jobs. I mean, the Yukon exploded in the last couple of years. I don't know if you've noticed it, but when I drive around Whitehorse, it is not the Whitehorse I moved to. There are so many people that live in my move chapter now. So it just feels different. It's busier. It's partly why I moved out of town. I moved to Whitehorse because it was quieter, and now I feel like it's a small, big city. It's very different now. But that means that there's opportunity. Obviously, like people are moving here because there is lots of work. So with COVID slowing down, this is where we're talking about. Again, I bring it back to capacity, but we're working in CarMax. Like I do feel it's time to engage with opportunities and communities that are real. We have a huge barrier right now. COVID aside, the barrier is bandwidth. The communities are interested in this. They do not have the bandwidth to do it. Now, I know there's talks right now on the news about them building infrastructure and stuff. It's a bit of a Band-Aid in some ways, but it's a start. We really need to think, again, with integrity and meaningfulness around how do we bring those communities into the World Wide Web to they need bandwidth, right? And our field, what we're doing with XR, is heavily uses bandwidth. So we have people in the communities that want to work with us, that want to learn these skills. And often it drops out. We can't work with them. They can't be a part of something. And so it is a problem with building capacity in the communities. But I think let's say tomorrow, if we had enough bandwidth for them we can then start working with youth in those communities on building careers in this field. They don't have to go to Toronto or Vancouver. They could stay in their hometown and start doing really amazing things in XR, in that field. And like I said, it's a catch-all. There's a lot of different sectors and deployments and opportunities, and I would just say industries within that word. But there's a ton of opportunity for communities to look at engaging with youth. They're, like I said, they're on their phones. They're used to it. They love technology. So imagine giving them a chance to work in that field and make a career out of it, but to stay in their hometown. And there is that opportunity with XR if we have bandwidth. That's our biggest barrier right now. Yeah.
And we certainly have heard that's for the Yukon to really emerge, that's something that we need to be more connected. Right. You've been super busy. What's keeping you grounded?
Thank God for my partner. Your my community keeps me grounded. I it's the people around me that are like, hey, slow down, or hey, you need a break. I have morning practice. It's funny, I had a pretty bad back injury during COVID. And I thought it was a physical back injury, but I realized it was largely stress related. When I said no to a couple of things in my life, business wise, and made some choices just because I needed to. I literally couldn't get out of bed for months. I was doing all these things, physio, eating right. I was doing some weird, meeting some healers and massage and all these things. And it was a negligible decrease in my pain. But there was a day where I said no to a bunch of work. And I told some colleagues of mine that I'm collaborating, and I was like, I have to step off this project. I literally can't come down and work on this because I'm in bed. And it was that evening, my pain was in half. And so I was like, this isn't just physical. There's a lot of emotional, a lot of obviously stress going on there. So my body, for years, I wasn't listening to my self-conscious, my body, and my body finally was like, screw you, I'm going to make you hurt so you understand that you need to slow down. So that was the first evolution of me understanding that I need to slow down. And I had a new injury recently, my back. So I'm like, I think I'm going too hard again. So my body tells me, funny enough, when to slow down these days, which has been good. And it's like an unstoppable force. When your body doesn't work, you're not working. At least for me, when my back is done, I need to. So partly how I stay grounded is a morning practice. I have a certain ritual, ceremony I do in the morning, a mantra, like around just getting into a headspace. I do either yoga or eccentrics, which is this amazing ballerina that I have an online. I work with her. She teaches you. She teaches you how to basically stretch and open your. But anyways, so she's been a huge part of my recovery. But I kind of spend time in the morning on me, on my health, on my body, and that tends to ground me for the rest of the day. On the days where I'm too busy and I can't do my morning kind of ritual, are the days where work is hard, where I feel like at the end of the day, I just don't have it anymore to kind of continue either the meeting or continue working. But on the days where I spend some time in the morning on me, I find those are my best days. So it's about like routine and ritual for me. And that's been when I don't do that, my back gives out. So yeah, so I'm taking a couple of days to focus on my body, my back, and my mind these days. Yeah.
I think that's really insightful, Jayden. It takes us a long time to learn that lesson in life. Sometimes too long that our body is keeping score for us, and we need to listen to it. Any closing thoughts before we sign out today?
I'll just come back to, again, our next gold rush is the youth in this territory. This internship taught me that. We just need to give them opportunity, mentorship, and access to the infrastructure and technology, assets, whatever it is that they need to develop their own careers. They're smart. They're going to figure this out. We just need to give them a little bit of a boost. And that starts with schools. It starts with doing it inside of high school, inside of junior high, elementary. The university is making some shifts, which is cool, but I think we're getting there. But I do think, especially within the field that I'm in, I'm already a dinosaur. That's the reality of this. And that's okay, because I've moved into the leadership role. I can be a dinosaur. In fact, they move slower. I like it. But we have a ridiculous opportunity in front of us if we just start engaging with youth in a meaningful way around how they can be leaders and stewards of XR in the world, not in the Yukon, but in the world. And so, yeah. And I'm doing my best to try and support it from my side of things, but it's a systematic change that has to happen locally around, and not just in Whitehorse. I'm talking in the territory, in the schools, and in the communities. Kids can stay here and have careers and work in a really amazing field if they choose to. It's just we need to start engaging with them at their level. Yeah.
Well, Jayden, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm inspired by the work that you're doing. It's exciting, and all the best.
All the best. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thanks, Jayden. Bye.
Bye.